I had just signed the last page of the purchase papers when my phone rang. The screen lit up with a name I knew too well, Caleb, my son-in-law. I switched to speaker. My hands were still holding the pen. The office went quiet, that heavy kind of quiet people make when they sense something personal about to turn public. His voice came through loud, steady, almost cheerful. "Hey, Dad, quick heads up. My parents are moving into your new cabin this weekend. It's huge, and you're living there alone. Kind of a waste, right? If that's a problem, you can always head back to the city for a bit." The real estate agent beside me froze mid-smile. Someone at the next desk let out a low whistle. I stood there with the keys still warm in my palm, my fingers trembling, not from age, but from the kind of anger that feels like shame. 40 years of work, 40 years dreaming of a quiet place to rest. And in one careless sentence, he'd turned it into a spare room for someone else. I didn't argue. I didn't even sigh. I just signed the final line, slipped the pen into my pocket, and ended the call. But inside my head, the words were already clear. Cold, measured, unshakable. If they think I'll stay silent forever, they're wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story that proves silence can be stronger than revenge. I left the real estate office with the keys warm in my palm and the last of Caleb's words still rattling the air behind me. People had looked, then looked away, the way folks do when a moment turns indecent and nobody wants to carry the shame home. Outside, the late autumn light lay thin across Sheridan Avenue, and the wind made the flags along the street click softly against their poles. I breathed in and let it out slowly. My name was on the deed. My hand had signed the line. Whatever came next, the cabin was mine. The drive out of town steadied me. Aspen leaves fluttered like coins about to drop. A hawk slid a clean arc across the pale sky. I made the turns from two-lane to gravel to dirt, each road narrower, each mile more honest. When I finally pulled into my clearing, the first thing I heard was the hush inside the trees. Not silence exactly, more like the sound of a place that didn't need me to fill it. I unlocked the door, stepped into air that smelled faintly of pine soap and old wood smoke, and set the keys on the counter. The place was modest. One long room with a snug bedroom and a square of kitchen tucked under a window where the light poured in early. I put my bag down and reached for the box that mattered, the one with the green ceramic mug wrapped in dish towels. Maya had given it to me the day I hung up my hard hat. "For the mornings you finally get to keep," she'd said, pressing it into my hands in a restaurant that was too loud for goodbyes. I unwrapped it now and set it by the sink. Memory felt like warmth cupped in both palms. I made coffee and stood at the window while the kettle sighed, looking out at the narrow porch and the line of spruce that guarded the edge of the clearing. The mug felt right in my hand, solid and simple. I took one sip and then another until the knot in my chest loosened. 40 years. Early starts, delayed vacations, quiet budgets, and careful math. And I'd bought this little square of peace with all of it. I could almost feel the noise in my head drain out through the soles of my boots. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Maya. "Dad, I'm proud of you. Call me when you're done settling in." A second later, as if she'd been waiting for my eyes to land on the message, she called. Her voice was bright at first. "How does it look? Did they leave the rocking chair? Is the porch as long as the listing made it seem?" But the brightness thinned when she tried to slide past the thing that happened in the office. "I'm sorry about what Caleb said," she began gently. He's been under pressure. It came out wrong." "It didn't come out wrong," I said, keeping my tone even. "It came out true." There was a silence that wasn't empty. In it, I thought of all the small ways you make accommodations for family without naming them. You give the whole chair and take the stool. You change a plan and call it flexibility. You let a comment pass because it's late or they're tired or you're not in the mood to fight your own kin. None of that is kindness. if it teaches the other person you don't have a boundary. Dad, Maya said softly, don't make any big decisions tonight. Let me talk to him. We'll figure out a visit, a weekend, something that makes sense. We can talk, I said. But this place... I looked at the mug. The light touched its rim like a small blessing. This place is mine. After we hung up, I unpacked the practical things. I hung the hammer on the pegboard and checked the screws on the porch steps. I wiped the counters out of habit and opened each cabinet once so the hinges would learn the shape of my day. When dusk came, the clearing turned to bronze, and a pair of mule deer stepped through the dim and flicked their ears at me, decided I was harmless, and took a few slow bites of grass before easing on. I ate a sandwich standing up and told myself I was only tired, not rattled. But when I lay down, I could still hear Caleb's voice, the unearned certainty in it. They'll be moving in. If you don't like it. The end of that sentence didn't need repeating. I have known men like that my whole life on job sites and in meetings. Men who call their pressure a fact and your boundary a problem. They often sound efficient. They often are scared. I slept hard and woke before the light, the way I always have. I set water to boil and stood by the window in my thermals while steam spiraled up into the cool. When the kettle clicked, I poured into the green mug, and the smell unlatched something familiar in me. The first swallow is always the most honest one. Bitter, hot, simple. I took it and felt my spine lengthen. The morning was colder than the forecast had promised. I pulled on a sweater and stepped out to the porch. Breath made fog. Somewhere deep in the trees, a woodpecker found a rhythm against a dead limb. I sat in the rocking chair, the one I'd counted boards to buy, and let it carry me forward and back until the sunrise cut a bright seam through the spruce. I tried out a sentence out loud. Not this weekend. And then another. Let's talk about options. And listened to which one sounded like a door and which one sounded like a wall. It's a small practice, speaking your own boundary where only the trees can hear it, but it changes the way the rest of the day fits. Around 9, I drove into town to buy groceries and a few things the inspector's list hadn't covered. Weather stripping for the bedroom window, a fresh carbon monoxide detector, a wire basket for kindling. In the hardware store, the clerk was chatty in a way small towns are. He asked where I lived, and when I told him the bend off County Road 12, he said, "Good spot. Folks keep to themselves up there." He meant it as assurance. I took it that way. In the checkout line, I heard my name. "Mr. Hale?" A woman a little older than me with a braid looped over her shoulder and a calm, clear gaze. "Nora Briggs," she said when I turned. "I live 2 drives south of your place. I was at the office yesterday, by chance." She didn't say I heard, but there was kindness in her pause. "Welcome to the Ridge." "Thank you," I said. I saw, in the way her eyes held mine for a beat and then released them, that a piece of town already knew about the phone call. News moves sideways in places like this. Neighbor to clerk to barista to neighbor, so softly you could mistake it for weather. Back at the cabin, I set cans in the cupboard and folded the paper sacks for fire starter, then took out my notebook. I wrote the date at the top of a page and a simple sentence under it. Keys in hand. Words I wish I hadn't heard. Cabin smells like pine and a small new life. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a stake in the ground. By early afternoon, the light had the thin quality of November, even though the calendar said late October. I checked the gutters, swept the porch, reseated the rocking chair so it wouldn't wobble. The small, solvable problems of maintenance are a gift. Turn a screw, and the world agrees to be better by that much. The clock on the mantel, an old pendulum model I'd found at a thrift store on the way up, ticked a steady vowel through the room. I liked how it insisted on time without rushing anyone. Sometime after 3, my phone buzzed again. Caleb this time, no buffer. "Let's get the schedule straight," he said, as if we were teammates meeting a deadline. "My folks are packing boxes. They can be out of their lease by the 1st, We'll need a truck. If we do it in 2 runs, they can take the bedroom and— Caleb, I said, level as a carpenter's bubble, I'm not offering the cabin as housing. That was never a conversation we had. He was silent long enough for me to hear him frown. It's family, Robert. You're alone up there. There's space. This is the practical solution. It isn't practical for me, I said, and space doesn't equal permission. He laughed once, the kind of laugh that hopes to push you off your spot. You're overthinking. We'll make it easy. They're low maintenance. Then it should be easy, I said, to find them a place that isn't mine. He breathed out through his nose, and I could hear the shape of the conversation he wanted, the one where he declared an outcome, and I managed my feelings about it. I let the silence sit. I've learned that silence is not a vacuum. It's a tool that reveals what someone hopes you'll fill. Fine, he said finally. We'll revisit this. Don't do anything dramatic. He hung up before I could say I had no plans to do anything dramatic. I put the phone down next to the green mug and listened to the clock while the room absorbed the echo of his voice. I felt the old impulse to smooth things for everyone, to be the water in the rough glass. I also felt the steadier one, new and necessary, to hold a line. Toward sunset, clouds gathered over the ridge and sent a drift of fine rain that smelled like iron and dust. I stepped onto the porch and caught the rail with my palm out of habit. The wood was solid under my hand, the grain raised slightly where summer sun had weathered it. I thought about what Maya had said. Don't make any big decisions tonight. It was good advice. So I made a small one. I reached for the notebook again and drew a box where a plan might go. 3 empty lines. Call a lawyer. Document everything. Keep my voice calm. It felt like turning a light on in a room I already owned. Inside, the kettle began to murmur. I took the green mug down and set it by the stove. Steam rose. The clock kept its patient count. Somewhere in the trees, a branch creaked and then settled. I stood there and let the quiet come all the way in. Peace is not the absence of pressure, I told myself. It's the presence of a boundary. 2 days later, the first real fracture came disguised as a family call. The morning light was cold, and the cabin smelled like coffee and sawdust when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. Maya's face appeared on the screen. She smiled quickly, too quickly. Dad, can you join a quick call? Caleb wants to sort something out about the house. It'll just take a minute. The words about the house made my stomach tighten. Still, I pressed join. The screen split. Caleb in his home office, his parents sitting behind him on a sofa that looked upholstered in money they didn't earn. Robert, Caleb began, using my first name as if that made him professional, not family. We've been thinking. The cabin's large for one person. My parents need a quiet place while their new condo finalizes. We'll move them in for a few months. 6 at most. It's really a win-win. Ruth leaned forward with a kind smile polished from decades of getting her way. It'll be lovely, dear. I'll cook. Gerald will help with maintenance. You won't even notice us. I set the mug down before my hand betrayed the tremor. That sounds already decided. Caleb laughed softly. Come on, it's family. We don't need paperwork between us. That sentence landed like grit between my teeth. I'd spent my whole life drafting contracts so that goodwill didn't rot under pressure. People who say we don't need paperwork usually mean they want what's yours without earning it. Maya tried to smooth the air. It's temporary, Dad. You always said family should look out for one another. I did, I said. Not move in uninvited. Silence. Caleb's eyes narrowed the way a man's do when he's calculating leverage. Let's not make this emotional. They'll cover utilities. Everyone wins. I looked at the screen, at my daughter, her voice softer now, caught between loyalty and logic, and I heard myself say something I hadn't planned. Winning isn't the point. Respect is. Caleb's jaw tightened. We'll revisit this, he said, the tone of a boss ending a meeting. The The call ended before I could reply. I sat there a long time, watching the empty space where their faces had been. Outside, wind moved through the pines like a slow exhale. Inside, the only sound was the clock's patient tick. Every beat felt like it was counting something down. That afternoon, I drove to town for groceries. I needed noise. Radios, checkout beeps, the harmless talk of strangers. At the general store, Nora Briggs waved from the counter. "Settling in?" she asked. "Trying to," I said. She smiled, then hesitated. "I overheard something odd yesterday." "Probably nothing." A man was in the cafe telling folks his in-laws had a spare place up the ridge. Said it was basically his already. She must have seen the muscle jump in my jaw because she added quickly, "Could have been bragging." "Maybe," I said. But I knew Caleb's brand of brag. He didn't tell stories for fun. He told them to make them true. Driving back, the air tasted metallic, the way it does before snow. I pulled over at a turnout and watched clouds muscle across the ridge. The first real anger came then, not loud, but deep. I wasn't angry that he wanted something. People always want something. I was angry that he assumed wanting was enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin's quiet pressed against my ribs. I walked the floor, counted the boards, the nails, the cost. At some point, I found myself standing by the window, the mug in my hand again. The moon laid a silver path across the trees, and I thought, boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks you choose when to open. I decided to keep a record, not out of paranoia, out of clarity. So I wrote, Day 3, Caleb proposes parents move in. Says, family doesn't need paperwork. Then another line. Begin list of everything said, dated, calm. It helped. The act of writing turned confusion into evidence. By morning, Maya texted again. Please, Dad, don't be upset. He means well. Mom always said you give too much of yourself. Maybe this is just one more chance to be generous. Generosity without consent isn't virtue. It's theft wearing perfume. I typed but didn't send. You can't build peace on someone else's silence. Instead, I sent, we'll talk soon. Later that day, a truck slowed at my gate. 2 men I didn't know rolled down the window. We're here to measure the porch, one said. Caleb said to check if it can take a queen bed frame. I stared at him until he looked away. No work order, no access, I said. The gate clicked shut behind them, the sound clean and final. I called Maya. She didn't answer. 5 minutes later, Caleb texted, misunderstanding. Don't talk to my guys that way. My guys. The words itched under my skin. I deleted his message without replying. That evening, I made soup from a can and ate it standing by the counter. The radio murmured an old blues track. I could feel the story arranging itself in my head, like scaffolding. Pressure, insult, test. I'd built enough houses to know what happens when the foundation cracks early. It never heals by itself. When the phone rang again, I almost ignored it. It was Maya, voice hushed. Dad, please don't start anything. Caleb's parents already gave up their lease. He didn't tell me until today. They think it's set. Set by whom? By him, she whispered. He says you'll come around. There are sentences that sound ordinary and yet rearrange a person's heartbeat. He says you'll come around was one. I looked at the clock, 10 p.m., and said quietly, tell him I already did. What do you mean? I came around to realizing he doesn't understand the word no. She sighed, a sound halfway between fear and apology. Can we just meet and talk? Maybe next week? Next week's fine, I said. I'll bring notes. Notes? Just things I don't want to forget. I ended the call gently, not out of anger but precision. Then I opened the notebook again and wrote the second entry. Day 4, uninvited contractors. Lease of parents confirmed ended. Maya uninformed. Maintain calm tone. The pendulum clock clicked once, twice. The air in the cabin had that hollow stillness you get when the world expects you to fold. I closed the notebook, laid my hand on its cover, and said out loud, "Not this time." Before bed, I poured one last coffee and stepped outside. The sky was clear, 1,000 points of indifference overhead. The smell of smoke drifted from some neighbor down the ridge. My breath clouded and vanished. A single thought stood clean in the quiet. The first fracture isn't when they betray you. It's when you start doubting your right to be treated with respect. Inside, I placed the mug on the counter, exactly where the morning light would touch it, and let the darkness settle around me. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the air already knew. I didn't call anyone the next morning. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's reconnaissance. I made coffee, the same ritual as always. Boil, pour, stir. But this time I wrote while I drank. The notebook had become my companion, the way some people keep a gun for protection. Mine used ink instead of bullets. Entry number 5, hold still. Observe patterns before decisions. That sentence alone changed the air in the room. The first thing I did was drive down to town and find a lawyer who wasn't afraid of small-town politics. In places like this, everyone's cousin is someone's client, and I needed clean hands. The second office I tried belonged to a woman named Avery Cole. Late 40s, sharp eyes, the kind of posture that told you she'd fought for her own credibility more than once. "What can I help you with, Mr. Hale?" she asked, pushing aside a stack of manila folders. I told her enough. The new cabin, the phone call, the family pressure dressed as kindness. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back, hands steepled. "You're not the first person to confuse peace with passivity," she said. "What you need is structure. Emotion invites chaos. Paper restores order." "Paper," I repeated. "Contracts?" "Documents," she said. "A revocable living trust. It keeps the property under your name but shields it from any sudden family adjustments. It's invisible protection. No drama required." That was the first time in days I felt my lungs fill completely. I spent the next hour signing where she pointed. Initials here, full name there, each pen stroke like a heartbeat regaining rhythm. The air smelled faintly of toner and coffee. At the end, she slid the thick folder toward me. "Congratulations. The cabin is legally untouchable unless you decide otherwise." "What about conversation?" I asked. "He's persuasive." "Then stop giving him an audience," she said. "Let the truth sit quietly on your side. People who manipulate need noise to survive. Silence starves them." I liked that sentence enough to write it down when I got home. On the way back, I stopped at the small diner on Main Street. Nora Briggs was there again, reading the paper with her coffee. She looked up. "You found yourself some legal armor yet?" I smiled. "Working on it." She nodded. "Good. Around here, boundaries only hold if they're written in ink or concrete. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from people who've been through their own storms." I thanked her and left $1 too much on the counter. At home, I spread the trust documents on the kitchen table. The green ceramic mug sat beside them, steam rising slowly, the smell of dark roast filling the small room. Light came through the window in clean stripes, landing right on the signature line. It felt symbolic, like the universe was saying, "This is your line. Don't cross it, don't let them either." I signed, and when the pen left the page, I felt something unclench in my chest. That moment became my evidence token. Not the paper itself, but the calm it represented. Proof that truth doesn't always need a witness to exist. For the next few days, I practiced quiet maintenance. No phone calls, no arguments, just routine. I fixed the gutter seam, replaced the cabin's smoke detector, cleaned the old rifle rack, though I hadn't owned a gun in years. Each small act whispered, "This is my ground." On the 5th evening, a car engine idled near my gate. I looked through the window. A silver SUV. Caleb's. He didn't bother honking, just texted, "Here. Need to talk." I waited a full minute before opening the door. The air outside had that damp chill that makes words sharper. He walked toward the porch like a man already in possession. I thought we'd clear the air. Maya's upset. My parents are confused. I'm not, I said. He frowned, thrown off balance by brevity. You're taking this personally. We're trying to do something for the family. You shouldn't see it as intrusion. I see it as occupation, I said. He gave a tight smile. Big word for a cabin. Big enough to fit 4 uninvited people, apparently. His eyes hardened. Look, if you want to be difficult, fine. But when the lease ends, they're coming up regardless. You can't stop them from visiting their own family. I stayed still. Visiting is one thing. Living is another. You might want to check the county code on property rights before assuming too much. He tilted his head. So you're threatening legal action? I'm clarifying boundaries. The silence that followed was thick enough to breathe. Then he scoffed. You know what, Robert? You've always been about control. Maybe that's why you live alone. I let the words hang there, heavy and unnecessary. I'd heard worse insults from better men. When he finally drove off, headlights cutting through the dark like teeth, I wrote in my notebook. Day 8, direct confrontation, maintained calm, recorded phrases, occupation, control, prepare copies of trust papers for safekeeping. I placed the trust folder in a drawer under the old tablecloth, then slipped a duplicate into a sealed envelope to deliver to Avery in the morning. At dawn, I made another entry. Silence is not weakness, it's bandwidth for truth. I reread that line until it stopped sounding clever and started sounding true. That day I returned to Avery's office with the envelope. She stamped it for safekeeping and asked, "You ready for pushback?" "I've been pushed before," I said. She smiled. "Then remember, you don't owe anyone a performance. Let them show their hand first. The louder they get, the clearer your calm will look to everyone else." A week later, snow flirted with the ridge. The first flakes melted as they hit the porch rail, tiny ghosts of winter. I was sanding a wooden frame when the phone buzzed again, Maya this time. "Dad, Caleb's furious. He says you embarrassed him with some lawyer thing." "He embarrassed himself," I said gently. "All I did was sign paperwork." She exhaled shakily. "He says you don't trust him." "Trust is earned in behavior, not blood," I said. She didn't answer right away. I could hear her trying not to cry. "I just want everyone to get along." "So do I said. "But peace built on pressure doesn't last." When we hung up, I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. Sometimes morality feels like loneliness in disguise. That evening, I sat on the porch with the mug, notebook on my lap. The forest stretched quiet under a low moon. The clock inside ticked through the open window, soft as a heartbeat. I wrote, "If you fight for boundaries, people will call it selfish. If you don't, they'll call it weak. Choose which insult you can live with." Then I underlined the last sentence twice. 3 nights later, something new. An envelope wedged under my gate. No return address, but inside, blueprints. My blueprints. Photocopies from the county office stamped Ward Construction Proposal. Caleb had filed an extension permit in my name, describing the property as joint family estate. It wasn't just ambition now. It was forgery flirting with felony. I didn't panic. I photographed every page, time-stamped them, stored digital copies in a hidden drive. Then I called Avery and read her the header. She was quiet a moment, then said, "Perfect. Don't confront him yet. Let him believe the silence is confusion. When the time comes, confusion will turn to evidence." "Evidence of what?" I asked. "Intent," she said. "The one thing courts and consciences both recognize." For the next few days, I rehearsed calm. I spoke to Maya about weather, her students, the new cat they'd adopted. Nothing heavier. I wanted her to keep talking to me, to stay close enough to see the truth when it arrived. Every evening I'd return to the notebook. I wrote less about what they did, more about how I reacted. Measured breath, neutral tone, no retaliation. By the end of the week I'd filled 2 full pages. On the 7th morning, I woke to find footprints in the snow. 3 sets leading to the porch, 2 leading back. Someone had tried the handle. It wasn't broken, just tested. A quiet test. The kind people do when they believe ownership is optional. I took photos, measured the prints, wrote the date, then boiled water and made coffee as if nothing had happened. When the mug warmed my hands, I smiled faintly. The line was holding. I looked at the papers, the snow, the clock, the empty clearing, and thought, let them come closer. The truth is patient. Snow came early that year. It coated the roof like dust from another world, softening every edge except the truth. By the second week of December, the cabin looked like something out of a postcard. Smoke curling from the chimney, deer tracks looping behind the shed, the world reduced to clean silence. But silence is never really empty. It's where secrets echo the loudest. That morning, I found a small yellow slip wedged under my door. Notice of inspection. County utilities. Routine verification, it said. The address line, though, was typed wrong. Hale Ward property. I folded it once, twice, slipped it into the notebook. The pattern was changing. Caleb's attempts were becoming sloppy, confident, or both. At noon, I drove down to the Ridge store for groceries. Nora Briggs was there, her coat dusted with snow, a newspaper folded under one arm. She gave me a look I recognized, the look of someone deciding whether or not to tell you what they've heard. You might want to see this, she said, sliding the paper across the counter. It was the Cody Gazette, back page classifieds. Ward family expanding mountain estate, seeking contractors for addition work. Beneath it, an address, County Road 12, Lot 47, my lot. Could just be coincidence, Nora said softly, but she didn't believe it any more than I did. I smiled to keep my jaw from tightening. Appreciate the tip. Be careful, she said. People who think they're owed don't stop at asking. On the drive back, the snow began again, fat flakes tumbling through headlight beams. The road narrowed until it felt like I was threading through a white throat. I thought about how Caleb must have filled out that ad. How sure he was that no one would question it. That kind of confidence doesn't come from courage. It comes from not expecting consequences. I stopped the truck at the gate, engine idling, and sat there in the pale light. I wanted to call Maya to ask if she knew. But what would I say? Did your husband advertise my home? She would defend him first. Love makes excuses before it makes decisions. So I didn't call. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped photos of the notice, the newspaper, the mailbox with its date-stamped sticker. Then I added a line in the notebook. Day 18. Ward family estate appears in public print. Begin compiling timeline for Avery. The next day, I drove into town to see Avery. Her office smelled of peppermint and legal pads. They've crossed from manipulation to misrepresentation, she said after skimming the papers. That's leverage for us, not them. Don't confront him. Let it breathe. Breathe? She smiled thinly. Yes. Let him hang his own words in public before you tug the thread. It'll unravel cleaner. She typed a quick email to her paralegal. Request county records, ward construction filing, property permit cross-check. Then she looked at me. You good at keeping calm? I've had practice. Keep practicing, she said. That evening, the phone rang again. Maya. Her voice trembled, not from anger but confusion. Dad, did you apply for some kind of expansion permit? Caleb said you must have done it years ago and just forgot. No, I said. He did. She went quiet. He said the inspector might call. He told me not to worry if the address looked wrong. Then worry, I said softly. Because lying politely is still lying. Dad, she began, but her voice broke off, replaced by a sigh. He's just desperate. His parents are drowning in debt. They could lose everything. And you? What? You could lose me, I said. If you stand by while he dismantles what I built. Her breath hitched, and for a second I hated how calm I sounded. But the words were true. After we hung up, I walked outside. The snow had stopped, leaving the night still and sharp. My boots crunched the crust with each step. The moon hung over the ridge like a coin the sky hadn't decided to spend. Halfway to the gate, I noticed something glinting near the post, a scrap of white plastic. I bent down. It was a contractor's badge, laminated, stamped Ward Development Group with a barcode and the date from 2 days earlier. They'd already been here. I felt no panic, just confirmation. The kind that lands heavy, almost relieving. You can't fight fog until it condenses into something you can touch. I photographed the badge, sealed it in a sandwich bag, and placed it beside the others. Newspaper clipping, notice, permit form. The evidence pile was growing like a spine for the truth. 2 nights later, Nora called. "You might want to come down to the diner," she said. "They're talking about you." It was close to midnight, but I went. Inside, the diner buzzed with soft conversation and the low hum of neon lights. At a corner booth sat Caleb, his parents, and a contractor I vaguely recognized from town. I took a stool at the counter, ordered coffee, and listened. Caleb was saying, "The old man's not handling things well. He'll thank me later when the place's value doubles. I'm streamlining the transfer paperwork myself." His father chuckled. "Better lock it in before he changes his mind." My hand tightened around the mug until the heat bit through. The waitress slid the check across the counter, eyes flicking between us. She'd heard too. In a town this size, words move faster than weather. I left cash on the counter and walked out before they saw me. The cold air hit like a truth serum. My anger burned clean, no smoke this time. I wasn't humiliated anymore. I was awake. The next morning, I met Avery again. She laid out the timeline like a blueprint. "He's built a pattern of implied ownership," she said. "Public statements, classified ads, third-party actions. That's enough for a cease and desist." "Not yet," I said. She looked at me. "You want to let it go further?" "I want it to be undeniable. I want my daughter to see it without me telling her." "Then we wait," she said. "But keep recording." That weekend, Maya showed up at the cabin unannounced. She stood in the doorway, cheeks pink from cold, eyes rimmed with guilt. "Dad, I need to see the papers," she said. "The ownership documents. Caleb says you're being misled, that some lawyer's making you paranoid." I motioned to the table. "There they are. Read every line." She hesitated before sitting down. The snow on her coat melted into dark patches on the wood. Her eyes moved across the pages slowly. Halfway through, her lips parted. "It's all under your trust, not shared." "Yes. He told me you were transferring it to family." "I'm keeping it for family," I said. "But not as leverage." She stared at the signature, at my name underlined twice. Then she whispered, "I didn't know." "That's the point," I said. "You weren't supposed to." Tears welled, quick and embarrassed. She wiped them away and stood. "I'll handle it," she said, voice shaking with something between anger and shame. "I know you'll try," I said gently. "Just remember, truth isn't the enemy of love." When she left, the silence returned, softer this time. The kind that sounds like a decision forming. That night, I added a final entry. Day 25. Maya saw the papers. Truth is leaking through the cracks. Next, wait for him to speak first. Truth travels faster through guilt than confrontation. I closed the notebook, placed it beside the green mug, and looked out the window. The snow had stopped completely. The forest stood still, reflective. Somewhere, an owl called once, twice, the sound round and solitary. I whispered to no one, "Let them think I'm quiet because I'm beaten. Quiet is just the sound of the rope tightening." Inside, the clock ticked steady. Outside, dawn waited its turn. The morning after Maya's visit, the forest looked almost translucent, light sliding through the trees like forgiveness looking for a place to land. I stood on the porch with the green mug, letting the steam drift into the cold. The line was holding, but I knew Caleb wouldn't stop until the line hurt. At 9:30, the phone rang. Unknown number. "Delivery for Mr. Hale," a man said. "2-bedroom sets, 1 queen, 1 twin." "You have the wrong address." He read it back. "Mine, exactly." "Who placed the order?" I asked. "Ward Construction." I told him to leave the items at the freight yard. Then I called Avery. "They're escalating," I said. "Good," she answered. "Escalation makes the pattern visible. Keep documenting." That was the moment I stopped playing defense. By mid-afternoon, clouds stacked heavy above the ridge, promising snow again. I set the kettle on and arranged the cabin exactly the way I wanted it. Papers on the table, recorder visible but polite, chairs squared to each other like two truths about to meet. At 4:15, tires crunched on the frozen gravel. Caleb's silver SUV, 2 silhouettes inside, his parents. They stepped out carrying boxes as if the matter were settled. Ruth smiled first. "We brought linens. Thought we'd start in the back bedroom." I opened the door wider, enough to show courtesy, not invitation. "You'll want to keep those in the car." Caleb exhaled through his nose. "Let's not make this theatrical." He looked past me into the living room. "Plenty of space. Mom can take that corner." I stayed still, the kettle humming behind me. "Before anyone moves furniture, we're going to talk." He set the box down hard enough that dust lifted from the porch boards. "About what?" "You've made this weird, Robert. All I've done is try to help my parents." "Help?" I said quietly. "By falsifying documents? Advertising a property that isn't yours?" He blinked, quick, involuntary. A man calculating which lie fits best. "I don't know what you think you've heard." Ruth's smile thinned. "We only came because Maya said—" "Maya saw the paperwork," I said. "She knows the cabin is held in trust." The color drained from Caleb's face. "You dragged my wife into this?" "No," I said. "You did, when you lied to her." The kettle clicked off, loud in the pause that followed. I poured 3 cups, set them on the table, and placed my phone beside them, screen lit, recorder icon blinking red in plain view. "You're recording me?" "I'm memorializing the conversation," I said. "For accuracy." His father, Gerald, muttered something under his breath, a curse muffled by embarrassment. Ruth sat down, defeated already by the tone of the room. "Caleb," I said, "you've crossed from misunderstanding into misconduct. You filed county paperwork listing this cabin as Ward Family Estate. You advertised for contractors. You ordered furniture to this address. You used my name without consent." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened again. "You can't prove any of that matters. It's just exploratory paperwork. Everyone does it." "Exploration usually stops when it reaches private property," I said. His parents looked between us, sensing the ground shifting. Caleb leaned forward. "You think you're clever, hiding behind lawyers and files. But this," he gestured around, "this isolation is messing with your head. You're paranoid." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Paranoia is believing something's there when it isn't. I'm just observing what is." For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked once, twice. Outside, a gust of wind pushed snow against the window like applause. Then Caleb snapped, "Fine. You want proof? I'll show everyone you're unstable. You think that lawyer of yours scares me?" "She doesn't need to," I said. "The truth already does." He stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. "You know what? We're done here." He reached for the door. "Come on, Mom." Ruth hesitated. "Caleb, maybe—" "Now!" he barked. I let them go. No shouting, no chase. Just the sound of retreating boots and the engine grinding down the hill. Inside, the air felt lighter. I turned off the recorder and labeled the file December 12th, Ward Confrontation, Full Transparency. The next morning, Avery called. "I listened to the audio," she said. "Perfect. Keep it safe. We're ready if they move again." "Move again?" I asked. "They will. Pride hates silence more than opposition." She was right. 3 days later, Maya arrived unannounced once more, eyes red from crying. She stood in the doorway clutching a manila envelope. "He sent this," she said. "Said it's an apology." I opened it. Inside was a typed letter full of conditional remorse. "Sorry you misinterpreted my intentions." No admission, just linguistic gymnastics. Beneath it, a form transferring temporary caretaking rights to the Ward family. Unsigned, but already notarized. I looked at her. "Do you see what he's doing?" Tears welled again. "I didn't know until now. He told me you agreed verbally." "That's the problem with verbal," I said softly. "It lets liars feel honest." She nodded, trembling. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing rash," I said. "But I need you to witness something." That evening I called Caleb and asked him to stop by. "I'm ready to talk," I said. He arrived within the hour, alone this time. Arrogance travels faster than caution. I'd set the table again. Same mugs, same recorder. Maya sat quietly on the far side of the room. Caleb glanced at her, wary. "So this is an intervention?" "No," I said. "A clarification." I slid the unsigned caretaking form toward him. "You recognize this?" He smirked. "Glad you got it. Saves time." "Good," I said. "Because Avery already filed a notice of intent to pursue fraud with the county clerk, citing this document as evidence." The smirk faltered. "You wouldn't—" "She did yesterday," I said. "You'll get a copy tomorrow." He looked at Maya. "You helped him?" "I read the papers," she said quietly. "And I heard what you told people at the diner." Color rose up his neck. "You've been spying?" "No," she said. "Listening." He turned to me, voice cracking between anger and panic. "You set me up." "No," I said. "You walked into your own echo." He pounded the table once, hard enough to rattle the cups. The recorder light blinked steadily. His breathing turned sharp. "You think this makes you righteous? You just ruined your daughter's marriage." I looked at Maya. "Truth doesn't ruin what's real," I said. She held my gaze, tears streaking but steady. "He's right about one thing," she whispered. "It's over." Caleb froze. "What?" "I can't keep pretending respect is optional," she said. He opened his mouth but found no words. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. A man finally facing a wall that wouldn't move. I stood, gathered the papers, and spoke evenly. "You're free to leave, Caleb, but you won't come back here again. Any contact about this property goes through my attorney. You'll receive formal notice tomorrow." He stared at me, jaw tight, eyes bright with something close to tears, but not quite repentance. "You're a piece of work," he muttered, then walked out. The door shut with a sound like punctuation. Maya sank into a chair, covering her face. I poured her water, waited. When she finally looked up, her expression was exhausted, but lighter. "He won't forgive you," she said softly. "I don't need forgiveness from the man who wronged me," I said. "Only peace with the one he hurt alongside me." She nodded slowly. "Then you already have it." Outside, the snow had stopped again, stars beginning to reappear. I opened the door and let the cold rush in. The forest felt larger somehow, as if the trees had been waiting for the noise to leave. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed the recording once, listening not for words but for tones. His rising, mine steady. It sounded like two different species trying to negotiate gravity. I labeled the file, then wrote in the notebook. Day 29, counter executed through calm, no escalation, witness present, emotional cost, contained. I closed the book and leaned back. For the first time in weeks, the clock's ticking didn't sound like countdown, it sounded like proof of life. In the morning, I emailed Avery the audio file and the scanned letter. Her reply came within an hour. "Excellent. The next move is ours. Sit tight. Public confirmation incoming." I set the phone down and looked at the mug, still half full from the night before. The coffee had gone cold, but the message inside it hadn't. Calm isn't weakness. It's leverage. Outside, the first light broke over the ridge, touching the snow with a kind of quiet approval. My calm had become his storm, just as Avery predicted, and storms, once spent, leave the world cleaner. By midweek, the storm had passed, but the world hadn't thawed. The snow outside glittered like glass, sunlight bouncing off every frozen inch. It was the kind of morning that pretends peace while the truth quietly loads its proof. At 9 a.m., Avery called. "County hearings confirmed for Thursday," she said. "You'll have 10 minutes to speak, but the evidence will do most of the talking." "I've learned to trust paper over noise," I said. She chuckled softly. "Then you're about to enjoy the quietest victory of your life." I hung up and looked around the cabin. The clean table, the green mug, the neat pile of documents. Every object had become a witness. I poured coffee, sipped once, and whispered to myself, "Justice doesn't shout." The courthouse in Cody sat square and modest between the post office and the fire station. Inside, heat blasted through old vents, carrying the smell of dust and wood polish. People greeted each other by first name. Everyone knew everyone. That's what made truth heavier in small towns. It couldn't hide behind anonymity. Maya met me outside the courtroom doors, bundled in her gray coat. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. "I'm not doing it to anyone," I said. "I'm doing it for what's right." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. "I'll sit behind you." Inside, Caleb was already there with his parents and a man in a cheap suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He didn't glance at me at first, then did, a flash of arrogance mixed with unease. Avery, poised as ever, leaned close and whispered, "He's nervous. That's a good sign." The clerk called us forward. "Case 44B, Hale versus Ward, property misrepresentation and unauthorized filing." The words sounded too large for the small room. I felt the weight of them press down, then level out. I stood when asked, calm as breath. The judge, a woman with a streak of silver in her hair, glanced at the file. "Mr. Hale, your counsel may proceed." Avery stepped up. Her voice was steady, unhurried. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a family dispute. It's a record of trust violated through administrative deceit. The defendant, Mr. Ward, attempted to alter ownership records, commission construction, and file expansion permits on a property held entirely by my client's trust." She placed the evidence folder on the table, copies of ads, contractor invoices, the forged caretaker form, and the audio recording from the cabin. Caleb shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. His attorney whispered something that clearly wasn't helping. Avery continued, "The audio demonstrates my client's restraint in the face of repeated provocation. This was not retaliation, it was preservation." The judge nodded slowly. "Proceed." Avery pressed play. Caleb's voice filled the room, confident, mocking, certain. "You think that lawyer scares me?" Then my own voice followed, calm and low. "She doesn't need to. The truth already does." The silence that followed was electric. You could almost hear people blinking. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Ward, do you dispute this recording?" Caleb swallowed. That was taken out of context. It was a private conversation. "Recorded lawfully in the owner's home," Avery said. "With notice, as the transcript shows." Ruth Ward shifted uncomfortably. "Caleb, maybe—" "Mom, don't," he hissed. The judge raised a hand. "Enough. I've reviewed the documentation. The county clerk's office confirms the false filings. The property remains under Mr. Hale's trust. Mr. Ward, your actions border on fraud. If this were civil court, we'd be discussing penalties." Caleb's face drained of color. His attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges a lapse in judgment. He intends to withdraw all filings and issue a formal apology." Avery nodded slightly, the precise outcome she'd predicted. The judge signed the dismissal order, then looked at me. "Mr. Hale, any final words?" I stood, straightened my jacket. Just one thing, Your Honor. I came here today not to punish anyone, but to draw a line where decency should have been enough. I hope that line stands, even when I'm gone. The judge held my gaze for a moment, then said, "Let's hope so, Mr. Hale." She struck the gavel once, not a sound of victory, but closure. Outside, the air hit clean and cold. Reporters from the Gazette hovered nearby. Nora Briggs stood among them, smiling faintly. She didn't need to ask. She'd seen the truth settle in the faces of everyone leaving the courthouse. Maya came down the steps beside me. "It's over," she said quietly. "Almost," I replied. "Truth needs time to echo." Behind us, Caleb exited, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, though the sun was weak. His parents followed, their expressions somewhere between embarrassment and disbelief. He stopped a few feet away, speaking just loud enough for us to hear. "You humiliated me." I met his gaze. "No, Caleb. You did that yourself. I just let honesty do its job." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, words dying before they could wound. For the first time, he looked young, not by age but by accountability. Then he turned, hands buried in his coat, and walked toward his car. Maya exhaled slowly. "He'll never admit it, Dad." "He doesn't have to," I said. "Admission isn't always the end. Sometimes silence is." That evening, I returned to the cabin. The air smelled of cold pine and faint smoke from the stove. On the table lay the signed court copy, case closed, stamped in red. I placed my palm over it, not to claim victory but to acknowledge peace. The phone rang. Nora. "Congratulations, neighbor. The town's buzzing." "Let them buzz quietly," I said. She laughed. "You handled that better than anyone I've seen. Most folks would have thrown fists, not facts." "Fists break," I said. "Paper lasts." Before hanging up, she added softly, "You've set an example, Robert. People talk, but this time, it's respect." Later, the fire popped in the stove. I sat by the window with the green mug and the notebook open to a blank page. Snow fell again, gentler this time. I wrote, "Day 35, justice finalized, exposure complete. Emotion, release, not triumph." I closed the notebook and leaned back. My reflection in the window looked older but lighter. The anger that had sat in my chest for weeks had nowhere left to hide. Then headlights appeared at the gate, Maya's car. I opened the door before she could knock. She stepped in, holding a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. "Mom used to make you these," she said. I found the recipe card. I opened the box. Inside were lemon cookies, still warm. A smell of childhood and forgiveness filled the room. "I didn't bake them for him," she said quickly. "I baked them for you, and for me." I smiled. "Then let's eat like we've both learned something." We sat at the table, the green mug between us, her tea steaming beside it. Outside, the snow whispered against the glass. For a while, we didn't speak, just listened to the sound of quiet people reclaiming peace. After a while, she said, "He's gone to stay with his parents, maybe for good." "Sometimes distance is the only apology that fits," I said. She nodded. "I thought I'd feel empty, but I don't. Just steady." "That's what truth does," I said. "It steadies." Before she left, Maya stood by the door and looked around the cabin. "You really built something here, Dad. Not just a house, a boundary that breathes." "I built it for peace," I said. "Turns out peace has structure." She hugged me, long and silent. Then she whispered, "Thank you for not yelling, for not breaking things, for showing me a different kind of strong." I kissed her forehead. "That's all I wanted you to learn." When she drove away, I stepped back inside. The fire had burned low, but the coals still glowed, patient, alive. I poured one last cup of coffee, set it beside the legal folder, and turned off the lamp. Outside, the snow reflected the moonlight so clearly that it looked like the earth was finally telling the truth. Inside, I whispered to the empty room. Justice isn't about making someone lose. It's about proving you never had to shout to win. Then I closed my eyes and listened to the clock tick through the dark, not counting down, just keeping time with everything that had finally come right. The morning after the hearing felt different. Not lighter, just quieter, like the world had exhaled once and decided to let me breathe again. The snow outside had softened overnight, blurring the tracks that led to the gate. It looked as if no one had ever trespassed here. I made coffee, the same ritual as every morning, but the bitterness didn't bite this time. The green mug was still chipped near the rim, yet somehow that imperfection made it more mine. I traced it with my thumb and thought, maybe forgiveness begins where anger runs out of language. On the table lay the signed case papers, folded neatly beside the notebook. I could have framed them, could have treated them as trophies. Instead, I slid them into the bottom drawer. Some victories aren't meant to decorate. They're meant to disappear quietly after doing their job. By noon, the sky turned silver. I heard a car slowing on the road and recognized the hum even before I saw it, Caleb's SUV. I didn't move at first. Let him come to the door, I thought. Let him practice humility for once. But when he didn't, when the engine just idled there like hesitation, I stepped outside. He was standing by the gate, hands in his coat pockets, head bowed slightly. No sunglasses this time. Just a man with more defeat than pride left in him. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Talking's easy," I said. "Listening's the test." He nodded once, eyes flicking toward the snow. "I won't make excuses. I screwed up. I thought I was fixing things. For Maya, for my parents. I told myself you didn't care about the property, that you just wanted quiet. I made that story fit until it almost felt true." He looked up, his voice steadier than I expected. "Then I watched the recording from court. The part where you said you weren't here to punish anyone. I don't know why, but that line, it stuck." I didn't answer. I wanted to see if silence would carry him the rest of the way. He swallowed hard. "I hurt your daughter, and I disrespected you. You didn't deserve either." The apology was real, not performative, not transactional, just raw. "Still," I said, "words don't clean a wound. They only stop the bleeding if they're followed by change." He nodded again. "I get that. I'm going back east for a while. My folks need help downsizing. Maya, she'll decide what she wants without pressure from me. That's the right kind of leaving," I said. He exhaled. "I wanted to give you this." He pulled a small box from his coat pocket, a square of polished walnut. Inside was a silver key, the one I'd given Maya months ago when I first bought the cabin. She asked me to return it, said it belongs with you until she's ready. The metal caught the weak sun and flashed once, a small, wordless surrender. I took it, feeling its weight. "Keys open and close," I said quietly. "This one will do both, depending on how you use it." He nodded, eyes wet but held firm. "Thank you for not tearing me apart in that courtroom." "I didn't have to," I said. "Truth already did that." He gave a small, broken laugh, the kind that sounds like the end of pretending, and turned back toward the car. I didn't stop him. Forgiveness doesn't always end in handshake. Sometimes it ends in space. That night, I set the silver key beside the green mug on the table. The two objects looked like they belonged together, the old wound and the new start, side by side. I decided to keep the key there as a redemption token, not as a reminder of him, but as proof that even harm can return as humility. A week passed before Maya called. Her voice sounded steadier, lighter. "Dad, he left yesterday. Took the car, the boxes, everything. You okay?" "Better than I expected," she said. "I've been staying with friends, working again, sleeping better." "That's the sound of freedom," I said. She laughed softly. "I was thinking of coming up this weekend. Maybe help you paint that porch you never finished." "I'd like that," I said. "The boards are waiting." There was a pause, Then her voice gentled. I'm proud of you, Dad. Not for winning, for staying kind. You didn't humiliate him. You just held the mirror up. I looked at the key and smiled. Sometimes the mirror's all that's needed. Saturday arrived clear and crisp. She showed up with coffee beans, paintbrushes, and 2 thermoses, hers blue, mine green. We worked in silence at first, side by side, the smell of pine and fresh paint mixing in the cold. After a while, she said, when Mom was alive, she used to say boundaries were how love keeps its shape. She was right, I said. Without edges, everything spills. We finished by sunset. The new paint glowed faintly gold under the last light. She leaned on the railing, hair caught in the wind, eyes soft. This place finally looks like peace. It is peace, I said. Hard-earned, not borrowed. Before leaving, she handed me an envelope. From me, she said. Inside was a note written in her looping handwriting. You taught me that calm isn't silence. It's courage that stopped needing noise. Underneath the note was a small photograph. Me, her, and her mother, taken 20 years ago in front of our first house. The edges were frayed, the colors faded, but the smiles were intact. That photo became the new bookmark in my notebook, the bridge between what was broken and what had healed. That night, I sat at the table with the green mug, the silver key, and the photo. The 3 tokens of this story. Memory, evidence, redemption. I wrote the final entry. Day 42, the truth has spoken, the wound has closed. Forgiveness granted, boundary intact. Then I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Outside, snow had melted just enough to reveal earth again, dark, solid, waiting for spring. Inside, the clock kept time, steady as a heartbeat finally at rest. Winter melted one quiet morning without ceremony. The snow thinned into ribbons along the tree line, and the air smelled like wet earth and thawed forgiveness. I woke to birds again. Not many, just enough to remind me the world still renews itself, whether you're ready or not. The cabin creaked as it warmed in the sunlight. I brewed my first cup of coffee with the window open, letting the cold drift in and mix with the steam. The green mug sat in its usual place by the window, but now it had company. The silver key, catching a glint of gold light. Both belonged to the story. Both earned their stillness. I stepped out onto the porch. The boards Maya painted shimmered faintly in the sun. She'd promised to visit again in spring, maybe bring friends, maybe plant something near the steps. Lilacs, her mother's favorite. I liked that idea. Roots that grow where pain once stood. Down the hill, the road was clear again. Tire tracks from old conflicts had vanished under the rain. Even memory learns to fade when you stop feeding it. I spent the next few weeks doing simple things. Sanding the railing, oiling the door hinges, trimming back branches that threatened the roof. The kind of work that doesn't demand thought, only rhythm. Somewhere between each stroke of the brush and pull of the saw, I realized something. Closure isn't a single moment. It's maintenance. You keep tending it, or weeds come back. I no longer checked my phone waiting for messages. Caleb hadn't called, and I didn't need him to. Maya texted every few days, her tone lighter each time. She wrote about work, about a small class she started teaching on the weekends, about baking again. She never mentioned him, and I never asked. Some silences don't need breaking. They just need space to breathe. One evening, she sent a photo. Her standing by the porch she helped paint, sunlight behind her, smile unforced. Under it, she'd typed only 3 words. It's holding strong. I stared at the photo for a long while. She meant the railing, but we both knew she meant herself. On the first true day of spring, Nora came by with a basket of apples and a folded newspaper. You've officially become local legend, she said with a grin. The Gazette did a whole column on the quiet man on County Road 12. I laughed. Hope they spelled my name right. They did. Said you handled conflict with dignity and restraint. You'd be surprised how rare that is around here. I'm not surprised, I said. Noise sells better than peace. She smiled knowingly. Well, maybe you're changing that. When she left, I sat by the window and read the article. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs about boundaries, respect, and how calm can sometimes be the loudest answer. Still, it meant something. Not because people were talking about me, but because they were talking about the way something was handled. That's all I ever wanted to build. Not a house that outlasts storms, but a story that does. The sun dipped low behind the ridge, the sky turning amber. I poured another coffee and carried it outside. The air was crisp, the kind that smells like beginnings disguised as endings. The woods hummed with evening life, soft wings, distant wind, the click of branches settling into stillness. I sat in the rocking chair, the same one that started this whole chapter, and watched the light move through the trees. The green mug warmed my hands. The silver key hung from a small hook by the door, swaying gently whenever the breeze passed. I thought about all the versions of silence I'd lived through, the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, and the kind that finally means peace. I thought about Maya, rebuilding her life with the steadiness she learned from truth. I thought about Caleb, somewhere far away, maybe learning his own version of quiet. Then I smiled, not out of triumph, but completion. Some stories don't need applause, they just need understanding. As the first star appeared, I opened the notebook one last time and wrote, Day 60, boundaries kept, love restored, peace maintained. The past now speaks only in lessons, not in echoes. I closed it gently and set it beside the mug. A small wind moved through the cabin, carrying the smell of coffee and pine through the open window. I could almost hear Maya's laughter somewhere inside that air, faint and steady. I leaned back, let the chair creak beneath me, and whispered into the quiet. Because forgiveness rebuilds more than revenge ever could. Peace doesn't come when justice arrives. It comes when you stop needing justice to feel whole. Sometimes the hardest part of forgiveness isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for letting them hurt you. But once you learn that boundaries are a form of love, for yourself, for others, for the future, everything changes. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to share your thoughts below. Wherever you're watching from, I hope your own silence someday turns into peace. And don't forget to subscribe, because more stories like this are waiting to be heard.